Hi everybody, I'm back with another video, and this one is with Rothem. Rothem is one of the least used heroes in Shadow Era, so I wanted to make a deck with him that could do some real damage. The idea behind this deck is to set up a field with Fuzam, and your weapon, which is the spear, and then use Fuzam to boost the spear's attack, and attack with the spear. And then there is a card called Desperate Tactics, which allows you to destroy a weapon, so the spear, and then deal damage equal to that weapon's attack +1. So this does a ton of damage with Fuzam, because Fuzam boosts the spear to, say, 5 attack, and then you deal 5 damage by attacking with the spear, and then you use Desperate Tactics to deal 6 damage. And it gets even better when you have Blade Dancer, which can boost Fuzam's attack. And then Fuzam can then boost the spear even further. Now, it's a little bit tricky since Fuzam is unique, so you can only have one Fuzam on the field at once. That being said, because there are so many ways to boost Fuzam's attack, it can be easy to deal an one-turn kill. Just like right here. I'm using Desperate Tactics to remove the spear, and I just did 14 damage right to the face. So the deck might not always do that, because your opponent will sometimes try to interfere with your plays, and if you're playing against this Rothem deck, you want to remove Fuzam as soon as possible from the field. So if your opponent does that, it's not, you don't need to use the combo to win. You've got the Yari strategy. So Yari allies are a tribe, and they tend to boost each other and be, in general, just have very high stats, is how I would describe Yaris. And so, yeah, you can win by swarming the field and having your opponent not be able to deal with your ally onslaught. And you can also win through controlling the board. So Valiant Defender is a card that really helps with that. That's the card I just played. It means that your opponent can't attack any of your allies for 2 turns. While they can attack your hero, this can be kind of deadly against an opponent, because then they won't be able to take back control of the board. So here, it looks like I'm boosting the spear, and I really want to use the Desperate Tactics play, but since the spear only has 1 attack, I won't be able to. The spear will be destroyed before I can use Desperate Tactics. So actually, it was a really good play on my opponent's part to use Jawbreaker to wear down the durability by 1 here. But it looks like it won't matter in the end, because I drew into another spear and can just do it all over again. So yeah, this deck is really deadly, and if you can't deal with Fuzam and Blade Dancer, then you're pretty much dead. And with Valiant Defender, it's very hard for your opponent to get rid of your allies, because they can't attack them. So they have to rely on ability damage and stuff. So I would say that decks that can deal ability damage and tend to do better against this deck. Weapon heroes as well can do better against this deck, but so far I haven't encountered any matchups that were really terrible for this deck. Even against like solo decks, normally a solo deck would be hard to deal with if you were just playing pure Yaris, but because of the weapon and Desperate Tactics, you can oftentimes deal with a solo hero as well. So this deck has a lot of coverage from a lot of different situations. So here I'm going against Dana, and against priests I generally like to rush them as fast as possible, because if I'm too slow, then oftentimes priests have a lot of high-cost allies in the late game that they can play. And so I want to swarm the field with low-cost allies and try to hurt them as much as possible, as soon as possible, so that hopefully I can deal enough damage to win before they can start putting out their high-cost allies. So here I really like my board. I've got both Fuzam and Blade Dancer on the field, which means that while it doesn't look like it, I am really close to winning the game if my opponent doesn't do anything. Which they do. They use Focused Prayer on my spear, which was a really good play. Because even though I'm able to revive my spear with Plunderer, I still can't use Desperate Tactics after attacking because it only has 1 durability. So that was a really good play on the Priest player's part. And now, of course, they're going to use Tidal Wave, which is going to make it a little bit harder for me to pull off some of those combos with the spear. So here I'm just trying to see if I can close this duel out, because Xana has an inbuilt hero ability that can heal, and Xana also has other allies that heal it, so if I can't deal enough damage to win soon, then they'll probably be able to, it'll be an uphill battle from there. But luckily, I am able to actually deal enough damage to win the game with Desperate Tactics. So, alright, now we're against Ethan. Ethan likes to control the board, so I'm gonna try and see if I can interfere with that and see if I can control the board better than he can. So here I'm just playing Fuzam. Fuzam is probably my favorite turn 2 play because it lets you do a turn 3 play of Spear and then boost it for 4 attack, which can kill almost any ally that your opponent played on turn 2. So that's exactly what I do here, and I'm able to kill the Opportunist just with those 2 cards. The nice thing about killing things with Spear is that it gives you a Shadow Energy, and that can be relevant sometimes, because that lets you use your Shadow ability. And actually, yeah, I haven't talked about my Shadow ability much, but basically Rothem lets you boost your weapons by 3 attack, and your allies by 2 attack. So, the reason why Rothem isn't that good, generally, is because it's kind of a win more card, which means that if you're going to use the ability, you usually can only get the best value out of it if you're already winning the game. And if you're already winning the game, then you don't really need the ability to win. So, Rothem has always been one of those heroes that seems really, really good on paper, but in reality was not very good at a competitive level because its Shadow ability is worthless if you don't have any weapons or any allies on your side of the field. Plus, it costs 5 Shadow Energy, which is a lot of Shadow Energy for for an ability. So now this doesn't necessarily apply to this deck because it actually is crucial for you to for the combo of trying to one-turn kill the opponent. So in this deck, Rothem's ability is really, really good because you can be losing the duel and get a victory out of nowhere because of the ability. So here it looks like I don't have... oh yeah, it looks like I can attack and then use Desperate Tactics. So I think I'm half this game in the bag. Nice. So yeah, this deck is really deadly, and there's not a lot your opponent can do other than make sure you can't keep Fuzam on the board, or any allies, really. So here I go for my turn 2 Fuzam again, and I'm playing this card called Yari Vanguard. It's really nice because it has 3 attack and 5 health when you only control Yari allies, which is really, really good stats for a 3-cost ally. So the other nice thing about Yari Vanguard is it has Steadfast, which is why my opponent couldn't retreat it to my hand. Because Steadfast makes it so that your cards cannot be returned or removed from the field without being killed. So here I'm worried about a Tidal Wave, so I'm just going to attack directly because there's a chance that my opponent will Tidal Wave and kill all my allies. In which case, it doesn't really matter if I go and kill the Tainted Oracle because the Tainted Oracle will die anyway. And it turns out that my opponent did have Tidal Wave. So whenever you're playing against Priests, or whenever I'm playing against Priests, I always keep in mind that on turn 5 I expect Tidal Wave. Especially when my opponent has a 40-card deck like this. The probability is that your opponent will have Tidal Wave on turn 5. So you need to prepare for that for sure. Here it looks like my opponent goes and plays Knight of the Crimson Dusk. Now this is a really annoying card because if you attack the hero, then it gets boosted, and if you attack it, then their hero heals. So kind of either way, I'm in a sticky situation. In this case though, I'm getting around that by playing Valiant Defender, which means that I don't necessarily have to kill it because he can't attack my allies now, which means that I can kind of ignore the knight and just go face for 2 turns, which is really, really nice. So here I'm just trying to summon as many allies as possible, just so I can get the best advantage out of Valiant Defender. Now it is a little bit risky because there's a card called Focus Prayer, and that can remove a support ability, and so since Valiant Defender is a support ability, my opponent could destroy it with that. My opponent opts to use Tidal Wave. They probably didn't have Focus Prayer in their hand, and Tidal Wave also clears all my allies, so that's another good counter to this deck. So luckily I draw into Fuzam, which is just a fantastic card, and it lets me keep going, and yeah, it's looking really good here, because even though I've only got 2 cards on the field, with Rothem's ability, it can be boosted by a ton. And yeah, I draw into Desperate Tactics here, which is really, really lucky, and it means that I can win the game here. And I actually am dealing overkill here. Like, this Desperate Tactics deals 10 damage, so even if my opponent had healed a lot more, I would have still won that game. So here's another Priest. This one's Jawbreaker. Now, Jerry is really annoying if you're a warrior, and the reason why is Jerry's ability lets you destroy an attachment, and warriors usually need Blood Frenzy. So Blood Frenzy is an attachment that attaches to your hero, and it lets you draw 2 cards in your draw phase instead of just 1. And since Jerry can just destroy it, that's part of the reason why I'm not playing it right now. I know that my opponent can just blow it up anyway, so I might as well just sacrifice it for the resource. But yeah, so if you're playing as a warrior hero, Jerry can be a very tough matchup. So here I'm going, and I'm a little bit worried about Tidal Wave, but I do want to get rid of my opponent's ally. With Attachment Priests, if you don't get rid of their allies, they can grow a ton, because they can just keep putting attachments on that ally until it becomes a really, really enormous beat stick. And that's actually one of the weaknesses of this deck, I would say. If your opponent can get an ally with like 10 health or something, it will be very hard for you to deal with, even with Rothem's ability. So if you can, you want to make it hard for them to play a fatty by putting on a lot of early pressure and making it kind of not so feasible in the late game. So this is definitely more of like a rush playstyle where you're trying to deal as much damage as fast as possible. So here it looks like my opponent is opting to not play allies and instead use his attachments to try and make it so that my allies can't attack. So Zale's Hymn makes it so that I can't attack with the ally that it's attached to, and Embers is a card that burns one of my allies, and then when it's destroyed, it deals 4 damage to an ally. So that is that's really problematic since Jerry's ability actually lets you destroy an attachment. Luckily though, I am able to pull off the Desperate Tactics combo here and deal 10 damage. It's not enough to win, but it is enough to make my opponent very, very worried. Now they have to get rid of the Pithing Spear, otherwise I will win the game next turn. So it looks like they might not have anything that can destroy the spear, so it looks like I have this in the bag, unless they have something like Focus Prayer. And yeah, I win that game. And so now we're moving on to the next match, which is against Banebow. So Banebow can be annoying because Valiant Defender isn't as good. Since Banebow has a ton of ways of dealing like ability damage, things like Hunter's Gambit and the hero ability that deals 2 damage to 2 different allies can make it really tough for me to make best use out of Valiant Defender, since they don't need to attack to deal damage. That being said, it's still useful here because I want to make sure that my Fuzam survives. And I'm lucky that my opponent doesn't have Hunter's Gambit or something to kill Fuzam right out of the gate. So here I'm able to use Yari Marksman, and that card is really good since it deals ability damage equal to the number of Yari allies you control and the amount of allies your opponent controls, which is really strong. As I was able to just kill that the Death Collector just by summoning it. Unfortunately, my opponent is able to get rid of my Fuzam, and here I make a kind of interesting decision. I used the hero ability a little bit early here to establish some board control. I'm not sure if that was the right choice because the hero ability is something you want to save up generally, but in this situation I think I wanted to go for board control more than anything else because I was worried that if I lost the board control, it would spiral into out of control. So by doing that and using the hero ability, even though it wasn't the best use of the hero ability, it put enough pressure to the point where now I still have control of the board, which is really nice. So here, yeah, it looks like I'm able to bait out the hero ability, so now I don't have to worry about it so much anymore. And I can really focus on summoning allies without worrying about them immediately dying due to the hero ability. So here I'm just going to go ahead and kill the Death Mage with the Spear. This way I can kind of gain another Shadow Energy, which is kind of important in this game because I had already used the hero ability a little bit earlier than I would have normally liked. So here, my opponent just played Durkan, and the problem with this card for me is that it returns to the hand whenever I kill it, so I kind of don't want to kill it, and I just go face, because killing the ally would just mean that my opponent would be able to just play again, which I don't want. So here, my opponent goes ahead and kills my Xander. I only run one Xander because it costs so much, but it is a very strong card. It basically gives all my Yari allies 1 health and 1 attack, which can be very good. So here I'm just going face as fast as possible, because it looks like my opponent now has access to his hero ability and can start controlling the board even more. So I really want to try and deal as much damage as possible, but as much pressure as possible for my opponent, so that my opponent has to do plays like this, where he's playing his Necromancer armor and using it right now rather than waiting for it. So by continually applying pressure, I think I'm able to prevent my opponent from taking total control of the board at least, which is really crucial for this deck. So here I draw into Valiant Defender, which is going to be nice because it's going to mean that I have a little bit higher chances of keeping my allies alive. Unfortunately, with Banebow again, it's no guarantee because Banebow has so many ways of dealing ability damage outside of just attacking. So yeah, this is looking a little bit scary because Banebow is one of those heroes that can deal a lot of damage to your hero on any turn, so you really have to watch out about low health. And so I'm very concerned about that right now. And here I realize I can't actually deal enough damage to win the game, so instead I'm gonna kill the Durkan. And I figure that if I use Desperate Tactics on the hero, I will be within striking range of winning on my next turn. So that's what I do. It is risky because here, if my opponent had just even like one weapon, they would have won the game. So it might have been safer to go ahead and Desperate Tactics the Death Collector, but that being said, if I had done that, I'm not sure if I would have had a good chance of winning this game, because my opponent has already established board control. So yeah, luckily my opponent doesn't have anything that can deal damage to me, so I'm able to actually go ahead and use Desperate Tactics to take the game.